All right, let's see here. You know, my whole damn computer blew out. The hardware. I don't know what it is. I complain about this all the time. Let's go to Ann Arbor, Michigan. How are you?
Hey there, Mark. Good show. Just a quick comment. Iran has always been a pest for 40 years, but I think it's important to not overreact. I think it's important to keep the sea lanes free, but not let Iran let Iran have their exercise circus and not be suckered into a skirmish that can only backfire into simply giving their politicians fodder for their own means.
So you think our military will be suckered, huh?
Well, not necessarily, but I think they do set a trap. I mean, why give...
They're not setting a trap. These people are for real, sir.
Oh, I believe that, but it's important for us to keep the sea lanes free.
I understand. It's important for us to keep the sea lanes free, but don't do anything about it.
No, we should be there, but we should...
To do what? Be there to do what? Be there to do what? Wave?
To engage if necessary.
Well, of course, that's the whole point. You're not saying something the military doesn't know.
Okay.
We're not the problem. They're the problem. We're not trigger happy. They're trigger happy. And if they fill the sea lanes, they have to be attacked. It's the way it is. That's the way it's always been. You know, we've always been considered a naval nation because we have oceans on two sides. You know, we got to be careful not to be sucked in. We're not being sucked in. I'll be right back.
Buy now, pay later. That's what credit card companies have been telling us for decades. Except pay later comes with interest, and that interest can get out of control fast. With Lending Club, you can consolidate your debt or pay off credit cards with one fixed monthly payment. Since 2007, Lending Club has helped millions of people regain control of their finances with affordable fixed-rate personal loans. No trips to a bank, no high-interest credit cards. Just go to Lending...
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. By the way, just because I move on to other subjects doesn't mean those of you who have called and are hold and wanted to talk about something I already spoke about won't be taken. You will. It's just that I want to get to other matters. We only have 3 hours here. A couple things going on. First, let's take a look at the second day the trial in the Eastern District of Virginia, that would be in Alexandria, the courthouse there, of Manafort. The Washington Post had a very interesting timeline. At 10:02 a.m., Judge Ellis tells prosecutors, stop using the word oligarch. You see, what the prosecution's trying to do here is they're trying to create a narrative and trying to create the most negative possible description of what Mueller was up to. I don't know Mueller. I don't know if he's innocent. Go. That's not my point. And so the judge is saying, wait a minute. He says here, I quote, an oligarch is just a despotic power exercised by a privileged few. What I want to avoid, he says to the prosecutor, is somehow to use the term to mean he was consorting or paid by people who were criminals. There will be no evidence of that. The prosecutor protested that the people funding Manafort's work in Ukraine are commonly referred to there as oligarchs. Political consultant Tad Devine, who, by the way, worked for Bernie Sanders, described one such man as an oligarch in his testimony. Ellis interrupted the prosecutor. If the term just referred to a billionaire involved in politics, Ellis said, then both George Soros and the Koch brothers would qualify. The term oligarch has come to have a pejorative meaning, the judge said. We're not going to have this case find that he associated with despicable people and therefore he's despicable. That's not the American way. Ellis said the government could file a brief on the issue if they want, but didn't think the use of the term was necessary. And why is the... Look, he's being accused of bank fraud and other types of fraud, right? So the judge is saying, okay, prove your case. Prove your case. The witnesses go on. They talk about money transfers and so forth. And then the prosecution gets into what they saw in the Manafort apartment, the types of clothing they saw and other things, very lavish. And so again, what the prosecutor is doing, the government's doing, Mueller's team is doing, is trying to get the jury to turn on Manafort because he's rich and he has a lot of money and he buys a lot of stuff. Well, that didn't get past the judge. Washington Post transcribing what took place. After the defense raised an objection to prosecutors introducing an invoice seized in an FBI raid of his home for proposed work on a Manafort home, Judge Ellis dismissed the jury for a break and then grilled prosecutors for a second time. Ellis expressed skepticism over how the invoice actually advanced the prosecutor's case that Manafort filed false tax returns and didn't fully report money he had made to the Internal Revenue Service. Furthermore, the judge worried that it might prejudice the jury against Manafort. The judge asked Assistant U.S. Attorney Uzo Osanye if it showed just that Manafort is awash in money. Osanye argued the document furthered the prosecution's case because it showed that Manafort had hid money from tax preparers and a bookkeeper, and that he used money from accounts in Cyprus to pay for a long list of luxury items. Those expenditures were never reported on the tax returns. Ellis said he would take the argument under advisement and decide later whether to allow the invoice to be introduced. Ellis has signaled some displeasure with the prosecution's case, grousing that it, quote, is gilding the lily. I understand exactly what he means. Make your case. Use your facts. Why are you using all these rhetorical arguments? The reason is they're hoping that again, it'll persuade the jury. His lavish spending is irrelevant. The judges interrupted prosecutors on occasion to speed up their questioning and bluntly question them at other moments. Interesting. Then, a few minutes later, the judge said that while he hasn't seen it himself, he's been told that lawyers on both sides have been rolling their eyes after leaving bench conferences. The implication, he said, is, why do we have to put up with this idiot judge? Don't do that, he told the lawyers. It's inappropriate. He said that if he had seen it himself, I might be a little upset, but that his eyes are not what they were 40, 50, or 60 years ago. He's 78 years old. Rein in your facial expressions, he said. And so then the judge rules later, about an hour later, that the prosecution cannot enter an invoice for proposed home renovation, saying all this document shows is that Mr. Manafort had a lavish lifestyle. He had a nice home with a pool and a gazebo. It's not relevant. He also expressed concern about showing the jury photos of Manafort's expensive suits, although prosecutors said it was necessary to prove the defendant bought and kept those items. To parade all of this again seems to me unnecessary, the judge said. The judge's skepticism could be troublesome for prosecutors who are trying to present the case that Manafort lived a life of luxury but paid no taxes or money here. You don't need to show his suits to make that case. You don't need to show invoices to make that case. You got the entire IRS working for you. You're asserting that the man didn't pay his taxes. What's your evidence? Certainly it's not the suits. Now, on Manafort's items from a place called House of Bijan, a menswear company that bills itself as the world's most expensive, Ellis expressed confusion. Or he's joking around. He said, look, if it's not Men's Warehouse, I don't even know what that means. Now, something rather remarkable happening during the course of today's case. Assistant U.S. Attorney Uzo Osanye surprised the judge when he casually mentioned that Richard Gates, Paul Manafort's former partner, remember he flipped for the state, and the expected star witness of the case may or may not testify. What? The prosecutor was responding to a question about an agenda from a meeting with Gates in 2013. He may testify, he may not, Osanye said of Gates. We're trying to shorten the trial. Prosecutors said that was not because of anything particular to Gates. Every witness, he said, Might not be necessary, depending on how the evidence unfolds. Ellis, the judge, said it was news to him, and obviously many others. He saw these reporters leaving the courtroom to report it, and he said, 25 people just scurried out here like rats leaving a sinking ship. Gates not taking the stand would be a curious development in the case. Prosecutors had accused Gates of being a participant in most of the fraud, the alleged fraud, it should say, that Manafort is charged with. And he would be able to provide an intimate window into what they were doing. Earlier this year, Gates pleaded guilty to conspiracy and lying to the FBI and agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. But here's why they're not sure what to do. They may eventually put him up. But Manafort's lawyers, the defense counsel, have made Gates the centerpiece of their defense. They've said Gates embezzled money from their business, and the fraud was meant to hide his own misdeeds. Manafort is saying, look, I wasn't the guy handling the money. Gates handled it. I relied on Gates, the prosecution's key witness, who just made a deal with the prosecution in order to save himself and get me. Rick Gates had his hand in the cookie jar, and he couldn't take the risk that his boss might find out, one of Manafort's defense attorneys said. Isn't that interesting? Assistant U.S. Attorney Uzo Asanye surprised everybody in that regard. As Rachel Weiner explained in her post looking at the characters in the Manafort trial, Gates and Manafort were close, she wrote. Gates started his career as an intern at the aggressive, controversial political consulting firm Manafort co-founded, working closely with Republican lobbyist Rick Davis. Gates left the firm to work for companies in the lottery and gaming business, former partner Charlie Black has said. But he reunited with Davis and Manafort at the new firm in 2006 and became, in the words of his indictment, Manafort's right-hand man. Manafort had just begun doing political consulting work for an aspiring Ukrainian politician with ties to Russian oligarchs. So in other words, the defense is saying, okay, great. That, in your own filings, you say was Manafort's right-hand man. We agree. He's the guy, to the extent there is any graft, who pulled it off. Now the prosecution's saying, well, we're not sure we're going to actually put him on the stand or not. Of course, defense counsel can put him on the stand. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Because the media basically regurgitates what's leaked to them by the prosecutor's office. The issue isn't collusion. The issue is conspiracy. So after all this time, it's not collusion, it's conspiracy. And all the former prosecutors who are now professors or adjunct professors or work on Wall Street or wherever they are, yeah, it can be a conspiracy to, affect the outcome of an election. Oh. And then I read during the break from ABC News, because the leaks are coming fast and furiously, that the reason the president tweeted this morning is because Mueller and his gang are pressing the point of obstruction. And they want to question the president about obstruction. And so the president tweeted out earlier this morning, this is a terrible situation. And Attorney General Jeff Sessions should stop this rigged witch hunt right now before it continues to stain our country any further. Bob Mueller is totally conflicted, and his 17 angry Democrats that are doing his dirty work are a disgrace to the United States. He went on. Actually, earlier, FBI agent Peter Strzok on the Mueller team should have recused himself on day one. He was out to stop the election of Donald Trump. He needed an insurance policy. Those are illegal, improper goals trying to influence the election. He should never, ever have been allowed to remain in the FBI while he himself was being investigated. This is a real issue. It won't go into a Mueller report because Mueller is going to protect these guys. Mueller has an interest in creating the illusion of objectivity around his investigation. That is a quote from Alan Dershowitz. I think this is all accurate, and people are out there saying this is obstruction. What is obstruction? Obstruction when a president openly suggests that his attorney general should stop what's going on. He hasn't fired his attorney general. He hasn't ordered his attorney general. He's publicly made a statement. That's now obstruction. When the president of the United States tweets a statement about what he thinks his attorney general should do, where he has the power to fire his attorney general if he wants, that's obstruction? Do people understand what obstruction is? The President of the United States is both a citizen and the President of the United States. And acting as President of the United States, he oversees this vast executive branch. And what's happening here is that the Democrats and the media, some Republicans, want to make the case that the President is not free to control the executive branch because they want more and more of the government to be unmoored from a president, unless, of course, it's a president they like. Now, I pointed out Monday in the first hour, second segment, that Jeff Sessions should step up and do something about what's going on from a constitutional perspective. He hasn't recused himself entirely as Attorney General. He hasn't recused himself from making judgment calls for the Department of Justice when it comes to the Constitution, whatever the investigative matter. He's sitting back. And notice he's not attacked by the left. He's not attacked by the media. They are perfectly happy with him being in the closet. But the biggest thing going on in this country right now, as applies to the president, is the fact that there is a rogue prosecutor on the loose. Even the judge in the Eastern District of Virginia, he's having to tell him, stop bringing up extraneous stuff. It doesn't matter how rich he is. It doesn't matter what kind of suits he has. You want to introduce pictures of his suits and an invoice of what he purchased? What does that have to do with bank fraud or tax fraud or conspiracy? You got a case? Make your case. The President of the United States, I just hope his lawyers follow what I say. It's no fun. It's going to involve significant litigation. And who knows what the outcome is with the Supreme Court. But the fact is, the Constitution and the law and the prior positions of the Department of Justice are on the president's side. Now, look, I just told you what Iran's doing, right? I just told you what Iran's doing. You know what North Korea's doing. You know what China's doing and Russia's doing. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is why those two memos were written at the Department of Justice saying, you can't bog a president down in this stuff. Particularly in this case, ladies and gentlemen, when there is no real crime that they're trying to pin on the president. They're trying to concoct a crime to pin on the president. The old favorite, false statements. The old favorite, conspiracy. The old favorite, obstruction. It's preposterous. And from our perspective, whether or not you're a Trump supporter, these are constitutional questions. They do damage to the Constitution. Of course the statist progressives don't care. They don't care about the Constitution unless they can use it to defend themselves or advance their agenda. Then they like it. Otherwise, they could care less. You have a man, his people, his candidacy was spied on. And Mueller's blind to it. And Rosenstein's blind to it. And Sessions took a pass. We know for a fact this campaign was spied on. They even had an informant, and Trey Gowdy thinks that's all swell. An informant on a political campaign, an FBI informant. A FISA court warrant on an individual who had worked in the campaign based on a dossier paid for by the opposition campaign. And the entire focus is on the president to try and create an obstruction scenario? Nah. No questions, no answers. We'll see you in court. That should be the answer. I'll be right back.
This is America's Constitutional Convention. The Mark Levin Show. Call in now. 877-381-3811.
I think what's not being realized also in the commentariat on the left or the right is there's over 60 million people who voted for Donald Trump to be president of the United States. Over 60 million people. And the elites and the establishment are trying to reverse their votes, the outcome of the election. And many people are not just going to sit quietly. I'm not talking about going in the streets with arms. I'm not talking about that. So it's not just an intellectual debate. It's not just Rodney King, can we all get along? That's the problem. You have a certain group of people in this country trying to undo what over 60 million people in this country did, legitimately, honestly, at the ballot box. And that's a big problem. And I don't think people are really thinking this through. People who are saying things like, well, let the investigation take its course. Well, we're going to impeach him if we take the House. Well, let's be civil with each other. Well, you know, a coup is a very, very dangerous thing. And that's how I view it. It's a coup. I'm the one who started talking about it that way. The others have picked it up. And I love it when it's quoted back to me, by the way. Incidentally, I'd be remiss, as they say, if I didn't mention and congratulate my dear friend Rush Limbaugh. 30 years on the radio. A trailblazer. The trailblazer. 30 years. And some people don't like him. Some people don't like me. Most people love him, who listen to him. And there are millions and millions and millions. And you know what? I look at the ratings. I get the ratings. He's as powerful as he ever was on radio. As he ever was. And you may not agree with everything he says, or maybe you agree with everything he says. But the fact of the matter is, he's at the top. And you put him at the top. And there's a reason for that. Now, I started out with him as F. Lee Levin. Cookie reached out to me. His longtime assistant, who handles the audio side of the house, years ago, decades ago, maybe 20 years ago, something like that, maybe more. I don't remember. Because of my legal knowledge, they'd see me on cable TV and so forth, and I would provide my thoughts. And it reached a point, and you know how Rush is, tongue-in-cheek, and he said, I'm going to name you the director of our legal program, our legal studies, F. Lee Levin, after F. Lee Bailey, of course. Still cracks me up. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun. And I thought it was very, very important. And it was thrilling for me. And he's always been supportive in everything I've done. So we want to congratulate Rush Limbaugh on 30 years. Doesn't seem like 30 years. It doesn't seem like 30 years at all. And I think I've been listening to him for 25 years. Doesn't seem like that either. Then I look in the mirror and I say, well, you do look older, so I guess it is. Take one atom of nitrogen and bond it with one atom of oxygen. Boom. Let us continue. Let us go to Claudia, Carmel, New York, the great WABC. Go.
Hi, Mr. Levin. Oh, what an honor for me to get through to you. I just want to thank you so very, very much for your defense of our Constitution and support of the military. I have a now 22-year-old United States Marine, and I love Donald Trump. He's not perfect, but I'm so saddened by the things that go on and disgusted by the politicians who don't support our president.
Mm-hmm. In fact, we have people who not only don't support him, which would be fine. We have people who are trying to destroy him. That's what's not fine.
And that's what's heartbreaking to me, because not all presidents before him were perfect, as we know.
No, and most of the people attacking him are quite imperfect.
Oh, my goodness. I can't even stand the sound of Chuck Schumer's voice. And it just disheartens me because he's our president no matter what. Mm-hmm. And I have a son who's willing to serve, and it just makes me sick. And I just want to thank you so, so much. And you give me hope.
Well, first of all, thank your wonderful family for their service, and you too. And you be strong. There's millions and millions of us who are behind you, okay?
I appreciate you so much. Thank you so very much.
Well, you're a
God
sweetheart.
Bless you.
You too. Thank you. All right. There it is. My call screen's back. Let us go to Mark, Wilmington, North Carolina, the great WAAV. Go ahead.
Mark, how are you, sir? Pleasure
All right.
to speak with you.
Thank you.
I just had a quick question. Wanted to follow up on what the last caller was talking about as far as the pulse of the country. I know you're really in tune with everything that's going on and everything as far as but do you really
come on, spit it out, baby. We're going to run out of time. Go ahead.
Now, do you really understand what would have happened or what could have happened if Hillary had been elected?
What are you talking about? I talk about it all the time.
No, I'm talking about a total military march on the Washington, D.C.
No, there would not have been a military march on Washington, D.C.
Sir, I beg
you. Get off the phone, you idiot. You're calling the wrong person. Military march on what? What is he talking about, Mr. Producer? Do you have any idea? Military march on the military's going to march on Washington, D.C.? And do what? I mean, come on, stay within the in the world of the reasonable, will you? There's enough crap going on out there that's extreme. You don't have to manufacture it. All right. Jeff, Waco, Texas. I don't have the call letters up there, Mr. Call Screener. How are you listening to us?
I'm just on my phone. I was listening on the radio. WDAP 820.
Wonderful. Thank you. Go right ahead.
Yes, sir. Just a pretty simple comment. Listening to the outcry about President Trump tweeting and that being somehow obstruction. I don't recall hearing anything like that when then President Obama made a comment basically exonerating Hillary while that investigation was going on, and I just don't understand how to square that.
You know, that's a great point. That is a great point, and I hadn't thought of that. You're right. So when Obama telegraphs that Hillary didn't do anything wrong, we didn't get all these phony professors and phony former prosecutors on TV and in print media telling us that's obstruction of justice. That's a great point, Jeff. I'll tell you what, how old are you?
I'm 37.
Don't hang up. I want to send you a copy of Plunder and Deceit. That was a very good call. Don't hang up. Certainly was better than the prior one. Mark, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the great WPHT. I sound like I'm talking to myself. My name, my hometown. Go ahead.
Thanks for taking my call. About the Manafort trial, all this extraneous evidence, why didn't Manafort's lawyer make an application to the court to suppress and preclude all of those arguments and all of this silly evidence that the prosecutors are trying to bring in? Because I'm sure that if they're having these arguments in front of the jury in open court...
No. He sent the jury out.
I'm sorry?
The judge sent the jury out.
Oh, Okay. But they should have.
But you're still making a good point. They should look at this evidence and then decide what they want to get out and tell the judge. Your point is they shouldn't wait for the judge to tell them what they should be doing. They should just do it.
Right. They should have just done that weeks ago, and then they could have argued it with the judge, and then the judge said, okay, this is in, this is out, this is out.
I don't know how to answer that. That's a good point. Here, another good call. I'll tell you what, don't hang up. We're going to send you a copy of Rediscovering Americanism. Don't hang up, Philly. All right, make sure that gentleman gets a book, too. I'm not hawking these books. These books are done. I hope people read them. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
All right. Let's go to Steve, Long Island, the great WABC. Go ahead.
Hey, Mark. It's an honor speaking to you. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you.
Mark, I have a question. I made an observation that, if you could simplify what this country is divided about, it basically comes down to, the right is looking at it from a logical perspective, whereas the left is looking at it from an emotional perspective. Almost like a married couple that can't get along. I mean, where do you see, the question is, how do you see us coming together, the two sides?
All right, two things. Number one, I think the followers of the leaders of the statist progressives may be emotional, but I don't consider the people at the top of the pecking order to be emotional at all. I consider them to be very diabolical, very clever, very mechanical in what they're doing, strategic. I know who their intellectuals are. I know who their past intellectuals are, and so they're not emotional at all.
Yes,
but they hold on now.
Go ahead.
But their followers are, for the most part.
Yeah,
and that's not enough to say they're just emotional. It's even more than that. Their mindsets have been altered from a mindset that was, that Americans are independent, they're self-sufficient, that there's free will. I mean, I have callers in this program. I have a right to health care. I have a right to education. I have a right to that. I have a right to that. Like zombies. And how do we come together? I don't know. I'm not Rodney King, and I can't tell you how we come together or if we come together. Over some issues, I don't want us to come together. Like, let's take one big example in our history, slavery. You don't come together. You defeat the evil. And this is part of the problem when people say we should just talk. There's certain things you can just talk about and certain things you can't just talk about. Certain things are evil. So I don't know how we come together, quote unquote. One of the reasons I think there's a great divide in this country now is finally, millions and millions of us are pushing against this statist progressivism before it's too late. Sir, thank you for your call. Hiring used to be hard. Multiple job sites, stacks of resumes. Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
Hi, Mark. I love the show.
Thank you.
Curious as to why the statute of limitations on the Mueller case doesn't apply, since it started in 2005.
Well, that's a pretty good question, isn't it? I'm not sure that they're charging him with crimes that occurred outside the statute of limitations, or I'm sure the lawyer would have raised that or the lawyers would have raised it by now. It is probably viewed as a continuing violation. That is, one tax return on top of the next, on top of the next, on top of the next, something of that sort.
Okay.
All right.
Anybody would know, you would. I appreciate it.
Well, I suspect that's what it is. Otherwise, they'd be knocked out. All right, my friend. I appreciate your call. Tim, Vero Beach, Florida, on the Mark Levin app. Go.
Boy, great to speak to you.
Thank you.
I hope you can go 30 years like Maharishi as well.
Well, I'm going to tell you I'm not, because I have 15 years in, and I plan to retire when I'm about 70, so that's less than 30. Anyway, go right ahead.
Good for you. Listen, what would happen if Donald Trump and the RNC was caught, red-handed, laundering $85 million of campaign funds?
Be more specific. What are we talking about?
Well, isn't that what Hillary Clinton and the DNC did? There's a big story recently.
Are they not allowed to share funds? I'm no expert on this.
Well, what I understand, the funds, it was to avoid the limits. So they were donating.
Yeah, but it's my understanding that that was not illegal. That's considered a gray area. But to answer your question, under Robert Mueller, there are no gray areas. So you're right. He'd come with guns a-blazing. But it's my understanding that's a gray area.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Is it your understanding that it's not?
No, I'm just saying that it could be. But if it was Trump, it wouldn't be gray.
Yeah, he'd be guilty as accused, you know. All right, my friend, I appreciate your call. We'll be right back.